Now, if you have a love of two-strokes or just older motorcycles, or you just love the bike you have no matter what age it is, I think you'll find this to be an interesting story. It's the story of my RD. After owning it many years and turning it into a cafe racer and turning it into back into a street bike and back into a cafe racer and playing around with it for many years, and you could watch this in 4K, adjust your setting. Now, we've gotten a lot of new subscribers to the channel, and I notice a lot of people have sent me emails and comments on the video about the RD400. I've had comments like, why didn't you keep it totally stock? Did you ever race it? Did you ever go to a track day? How many miles does it have? And I know because most of the videos I post were actually riding the motorcycle. So I thought today, instead of riding the motorcycle, I would get to describe some of the things I've done to modify the bike, why I did them, how they worked out in the end, actually, and maybe a little bit of the history of the motorcycle. I've had RDs since the early 70s. And in fact, the 1974 one, Ray Straub in Florida, still has in his collection. So it's an interesting story. Ray and I, back at the time, we raced in Amar, and I had a 125 Bultaco, but when I upgraded, and I thought it was an upgrade at the time, to a 350 Yamaha, I was really impressed with how much fun they were to ride on the street and how good they were in club racing. And this is one of the few pictures I have of that bike, one of the bikes that I raced for many years, and this was just a great bike in every possible way. So probably the most common question a lot of people ask, and I assume most of these people are younger people. I'm 78 years old. So I have a long history, but a lot of people that say they've just bought a bike in the last 10 years, they don't remember the glory days of two-strokes. And in my case, I remember it well. I have plenty of great memories. And in fact, I can remember the Bultaco that I was using in Amar, I got from Ray Straub, and he was racing it, and he had years of, we were both racing, and Fred Anderson, our friend, was racing too. So we had an awful lot of interaction. But when I got the first Yamaha and went to the track at Bridgehampton, I was convinced for life this was one of the bikes I wanted to have in my collection. Now, to start the history, I had 7 of them back in the day. 6 of them no longer exist. They're in parts when we've used them to make other bikes. But the one Ray has is a jewel, and I think 4 or 5 years ago, I don't remember how many years ago, I restored the whole bike from him. I think it was when I went to the Daytona. When I went to Daytona in Florida, that's when I rode the bike, and this is interesting history. I rode it while I was at Ray's house, and it was really in rough shape. It was in need of restoration. He brought the bike up here from Florida. Luciano was very helpful. We spent a whole winter and we restored it to, I think, better than new condition. I then rode it for a summer before he took it back to Florida. And then at that time, now this is important to understand, I did not have a two-stroke in my collection. But when I rode that restored bike, I was ready. And so the way this worked is because Luciano is the master at finding these bikes, and wherever he finds them on the internet, he found me a bike. It was in South Jersey, and he called me up on Valentine's Day. It was on Valentine's Day about lunchtime, and this is a very interesting part of this motorcycle's history. He called up at lunchtime. He says, we have to go down and get the bike. I negotiated with the guy. I got such and such a price, and I looked in my wallet, and I didn't have the cash. So I had to call Karen, who was still working. She had to leave her job, go to the bank, get cash, come back with the cash. We took off in his truck, ran down because the bike had just come up on whatever, Craigslist or whatever. And the big thing is I wanted the bike. And when I saw it in real life, now of course the picture they show on the internet and the picture in real life, very different. I still wanted it, and I have that picture. I'm going to share that picture. But when we got it, it was in pretty rough shape, but it did run okay. And I was happy because we were coming up on a part of building my bike collection that I needed to get a two-stroke. Now this is the picture of the bike you see in the video with the Yamaha yellow paint job the day we picked it up. And I think Malcolm was the one that turned me onto it, and I asked Luciano,
I don't want to leave out credit. If Malcolm, if you were the one that found this, I know Malcolm was the one that found the DG pipes for half price. So that's what the bike looked like when I first got it. So one of my first things I wanted to do, and I had plenty of spare parts, I had plenty of spare wheels and fenders and things like that. I wanted to piece together, and I did this all on previous videos, and that was about 12 years ago, 10, 12 years ago. I wanted to get the bike that it was at least presentable, and then in the middle of doing it, I said, I'm just going to paint the whole bike over. And I wanted to put the Kenny Roberts type paint job on, and that was one of the labor of loves of getting this bike ready for the time it would be in my collection. Now, I know the purists would say, you should have kept the chrome fenders, and you should have done this and made an exact copy of a Yamaha paint job. No, I wanted to have a one-of-a-kind. All the bikes in my collection are one-of-a-kinds. I don't want to have something that I look in a magazine and there's 10 other ones exactly like mine. I want them to be just like this. I want to have a unique bike, and all the bikes in my collection are unique, and I'm not a purist that I need to have every nut and bolt like it was the day it left the factory. Now, I made that cafe seat from scratch. That's not something you buy in the store. And I modified it, and over the course of many years, I had the seat on, back off, the stock seat on, the back fender on. I was constantly changing parts on a bike to make it just a little different than the year before. And over the years, it's been like having 4 or 5 bikes. Now, somewhere at that same time, I had just gotten my new buffing wheel from Harbor Freight, and I went crazy for many hours buffing parts. And while I had the motor apart, I had seized up a piston, riding with Joe Roselli, and I don't remember who else, Luciano maybe. No, it was just Joe Roselli. I have that piston on my desk to remind me, don't do that. But that was an important lesson right when the bike had just been painted. It was kind of new, and we were going to a 2-stroke meetup. But remember, back then, all of my friends had 2-strokes. Mark Morgan had one, Luciano had several, and we would have 2-stroke days. Now that they've kind of faded away, but I have a feeling they might be coming back this summer. Luciano has a 350 he's working on right now, and I know when you have that in your blood, it never goes away. And anybody that ever raced 2 strokes knows what this looks like. This is why we leave the jetting just a little bit on the rich side, even in the winter, just to keep this from happening, and can ruin your whole day. And when I bought the bike, it had a little over 7,000. It's got 7.5, actually 7.6 now. So I've put about 10,000 miles on the bike. Maybe not exactly that, a little more, a little less. But every one of those miles, except for the seized piston, it has just been as reliable as a stone. And it has not been anything like what I remember back in the day when we were racing these, of replacing pistons and rings and on a regular basis. When you use a bike like this as a street bike, they're as reliable as a stone. And I always remember how many times we would, my late friend Kenny Augustine, he'd take the bike out for a little ride and he'd say, up, time for a set of pistons, up, time for this, time for that. And back in the day, he was a race bike tuner. He did a lot of the maintenance on a bike and kept the bikes, all of the 350s and 400s, running like Rolex watches. I had several people comment that they have similar bikes with DG pipes, different kinds of pipes. I have 2 different styles of expansion chambers. I've had them both on the bike, and lately, and I'll explain that later in a video, I've gone back to putting a whole bike stock. But when it was a cafe racer, this was such a cool sound, and at my age now, I like the sound of its stock. A neat part of the story is, and to show how far back I go with this stuff, I was looking for a test wheel to paint some test paint on when I was painting the MT-09 wheels. And I went up in my rafters and I had 5 RD wheels. So another comment that I've heard is, oh, you know, Yamaha, they always came with 1 mirror, and it was a round mirror. And you know what? I had N-bar mirrors, and I had 3 or 4 different sets of Renthal bars on this bike. And what I found out is the best vision, and for me, I'm not a big fan of not being able to see who's behind me, especially in this day and age. So it wound up those mirrors, and those are the mirrors, by the way, from the MT-09. And the only thing that I don't like about them, they're flat black, but they may get painted this summer. You never know. Now another item is the carbs. When we did the restoration of the 350 for Ray, he replaced the carbs with brand new ones and from Sudco, and I was convinced if I did a restoration on this, I ought to replace the carbs too, and in the course of doing it, it took me an extra year to get motivated up to do it, but I made a video of replacing them. It's not a one turn of the screwdriver thing. There's a lot of little things you have to know to do it. Check out the separate video, but with the brand new carbs, boy, it is so much smoother pulling away from a traffic light, and of course holding it wide open through the gears. Now when I first got the bike, the front disc was drilled, the back disc wasn't, and I wanted it to match, and that turned out to be quite a big job. Now when I got the bike, it didn't have a drilled back disc. I had to drill that disc, and I tried to match the front one, which was drilled. Not sure I did that great of a job, but anybody knows they've ever drilled out a disc, you wear out a lot of drills. Luckily, I had a lot of drills at the time. So Luciano donated these to my cause at one time. They seem to work fine. I'm not sure they're the quality that if we were doing track days I'd want, but they're certainly good enough for the street, and they look kind of cool on a restored bike. Now at some point in the restoration, this bike was dripping a little bit of oil out of this side cover, and I think it's the same problem that Joe Padula had with his 400. And what I did to solve it, Circle Cycle had given me some side cover gaskets, and the problem is they were as old as the bike. So what I did, I went to AutoZone, got brand new gasket material, and made a replica. I made a video of doing that gasket making. There's plenty of videos out on the channel, but the new fresh gasket material totally solved the problem. Now I have two sets of heads, a set that the late Kenny Augustine made up for me that are high compression, and probably good if we were going to do track days or we were going to do some kind of high performance riding, but for street riding, I preferred the stock heads, and I always anneal the old gaskets because I know that's one of the old tricks from the old days. And the engine is so easy to work on, and every time I've worked on it, Luciano has been so helpful. Always handy to have an extra set of hands when you pull the top end off these. Of course, one thing I'm real happy about, the paint has held up over the years. It's over 10 years now. The paint has held up just beautifully. Every part of the work that I did on this, actually even the engine, and with Luciano when I did the last time we did the top end, from that point on, and that's probably 5,000 miles, it's just been one kick starts and just a ton of fun to ride. And we always, anytime I adjust the timing, I always do it with Luciano's help and a dial indicator. One of the annoying things about, as we go further and further into the future with this bike, it gets difficult to get the right tires. I did get a set of Sport Demons from Vlad that seemed to be great with new tubes, and I'm not counting my chickens how they're going to hold up. The other ones held up almost 10,000 miles, almost. I just put these on not long ago. I'm hoping I'm going to get another 10 out of them. I replaced the headlight with a headlight from Economy Cycle, and I really asked John down there to get me one where the chrome was perfect. I was very fussy about it, and he did. And I made a video. It's not exactly a drop-in. It's a little bit narrower, and you need to make a little spacer, but nothing you can't figure out. Again, that video is out on the channel. The big one, painting the wheels. Whenever I talk about anything, painting wheels, a lot of people think it's Saturday morning, and you just go get a can of spray paint and paint the wheels. Well, the way this worked out for me, it was a real labor of love. But over the years, I had this as a cafe racer, I had it as a street bike, I had it with the high compression heads, I had it with every combination of parts that I had, and I like the idea that I can change it around pretty much every winter, make it a little bit different bike like an Evil Twin. And one of my goals in the future, I'm going to try to, at some point in time, Luciano, I think, has an extra set of bodywork now. He's got a tank, I know that. And so what would be cool now is if I have enough parts, make an Evil Twin out of it, paint it up like the red and white Yamaha colors, and it would then be almost like having two bikes, like I always say with Evil Twins, two bikes for the price of one. But it's historically registered, and the insurance is super cheap. I think it's under $30 a year, and never have to pay for a registration again. So the odds are good this bike is going to go to the grave with me. And what's nice is all the parts of this bike, they're just bolt-ons. I don't have to cut anything, weld anything. If I want to turn it into a cafe racer with tuned pipes, and I can do it in one afternoon. And over the years I've had different, here's one of the sets of tuned pipes. The different shocks, I had 3 different sets of shocks, and a set of conies, and a set of those ones Luciano gave me. And the lower bars, the Renthal, the real narrow cafe bars, and the bar end mirrors. I was constantly changing the bike up every season. But as you can imagine, my goal is to keep the bike till the day I die. And this is so many good memories for me. So many things that when I get on this bike, I feel young again. I feel like the arthritis goes away. This is a better cure for arthritis than the medicine. It is such a wonderful time machine. And over the years, I've just come to love it more and more. The older it gets, well, Karen says the same about me, but I'm not sure that that's a good analogy. But it has truly been a bike I want to keep. Now it's just a special thing for me to look back at all the time I've been involved with these 2-stroke Yamahas, even going back to the very beginning. And an example is, here's one of the very few pictures I have. There's my Scarlet Macaw sitting on the seat of my race bike. And Kenny Augustine had modified those DG type pipes. I don't even know if they were DGs. And then Karen getting me this for Valentine's Day. When I asked her to go take the money out of the bank, she said, "Here's your Valentine present, honey. Thank you, Karen." And that was some Valentine present. And I did 3 of these in one season. We had, Luciano had 2 and I had 1. And there were times we parked all 3 of them together. Now see, that's not the tank you see in the bike. That's Luciano's tank. Doesn't have the arrows on top of the tank. But I did 3 of them. And by the way, another trick, people that don't want a bigger gas tank, that's a GS 1100E gas tank, which is very easy to adapt. Actually, the petcock's the hardest thing to adapt. Here's the race bike now today, and this is after my restoration and all of the work we did in making the seat. And geez, I just look back at that. And Luciano, thank you for all your help. That was great. And knowing that here's Ray still has it, and he just goes out on that, and he's young again too. And the next time I get to visit him in Florida, I'm going to ride it again. But that bike was up here for almost a full year when I did the restoration, and we had so many good rides on these 2-strokes. You just look back and you just can't believe how good the life we had was. It's just to me, it's amazing. And every time I hear that burble of the 2-strokes, I just wish we could get all the guys back, get Mark Morgan back on his 2-stroke, and all of the guys that had 2-stroke. Dave actually had a 2-stroke. And then you come up to today, and this is the video we just shot a week or 2 ago, and getting out on that, knowing all the time, all the energy I put into it, every minute I spent was well invested. And I said, as before, my ultimate goal is, this is the bike I want to keep for the rest of my life. And on the day of my departing this earth, I want to still be able to smell a little bit of that 2-stroke oil. So if you're new to the channel and you've just stumbled on us for the first time, we do try to do interesting things with 2-strokes, both riding, restorations, modifying, going on 2-stroke rides, and riding with our friends that have these bikes. And the passion for 2-strokes seems to live on. If you enjoyed the video, please take a second and hit the like button. Helps us get more 2-stroke videos out onto the internet. And I enjoy watching anything at all to do with 2-strokes. And thanks so much for watching.